Greetings and welcome to Conversations with Tony Mobley. Yeah, we're back. We're back. And so we are 1 year and one new episode in. So welcome to Conversations with Tony Mobley. And tonight I am on with Dr. Kent Kersey. Thank you so much for being here. And I want to say thank you again for everyone who has supported Conversation with Tony Mobley over this last year. Indeed, this is episode 53 of Conversations with Tony Mobley. And again, we want to thank everyone for being a part of this journey. Why are we here? We're here because life has provided me the opportunity to have real conversations with real people. First, I want to thank my guests from our conversation last week, Mr. George E. Kennedy Jr., that is, on episode 52. And I want to thank the team behind Conversations with Tony Mobley. So we are here to have conversations. We hope to help others with these conversations, but I need your help. Register on conversationswithtonymobley.com. That's right. Why is he doing this again? Because we have a tool that is absolutely fabulous for being able to ask questions. It's called Mukana. You can ask a question on the Conversation with Tony Mobley Mukana chat. That question can be voted up and down. That's right. And by doing that, you ensure that your question is more than likely to be answered if you do it through the Mukana chat. But guess what? We are always doing something new. So now we have what we call the quick question form. That's right. The quick question form. Wow, is that a tongue tweezer? Conversation with Tony Mobley. Go to conversationwithtonymobley.com. And there you will see the quick question form. All you have to do is put your name in and ask your question. And we will get that question. So again, the quick question form is another way that you can ask a question in Conversation with Tony Mobley. So that's new. And we hope that you will try it out tonight. If you like this and past conversations, we ask that you like and subscribe. And we also ask that you set the bell to all notifications and be reminded of upcoming conversations. And so now we are going to get started with this conversation with Dr. Kent Kersey. And so we are going to ask the very first question. And the very first question is, who is Kent Kersey, Ph.D.?
Wow. Yeah, Ph.D. Nobody seems really care. My family doesn't seem to care about that, but so I'm glad you do. That's so. Who am I? I think the two probably most important roles I have is husband and father. Those are probably the two biggest jobs God has given to me. And so I've been married to my best friend, Terry, for many, many years, 30 some years, man. It's been a lot. We were both like, I was 20 when we got married. So we grew up together, and I'm much older than 20 now. So we're pushing 40, actually, getting close to it. So my wife, Terry, worked in public education for 35 years. She just retired last year and is really enjoying it a lot. Being a elementary school teacher over the last few years have been really, really tough. We've talked about that before on office hours. And so she was able to retire last year and do volunteering with a bunch of different places. I have a son and a daughter, and I also have two grandsons. And I have been at Corbin University in Salem, Oregon for about 20 years. Yeah. And teach theology, philosophy, church history, and also have been campus pastor. I was campus pastor for a long time, sort of moving towards some of those activities again in this upcoming year. And yeah, so that's sort of me in a nutshell, I think.
Well, thank you so much, Kent, for sharing that with us. And yes, it's important to me that you are recognized as Dr. Kent Kersey because you earned it. And so from time to time during our conversation, I will be referring to you as Dr. Kersey because, as I said, you earned it. Our next question is, what are some things that your parents taught you that you are currently using today?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think as I think about sort of a bigger idea is that when I was like 11 years old, my father was pastoring in Southern California. He was a pastor at a Southern Baptist church. And in the Navy, he'd served in World War II in the Navy, and he'd spent some time in Australia during that time and absolutely loved it. And he decided that we as a family were going to move from Southern California all the way to Australia. So sold everything, sold the house, sold everything. We just moved over as a family, didn't really know what we were getting into. And it was a great family adventure. You know, as you look back, it kind of seems a little crazy that you would do that with a family, you know, uproot them from one country and move them over without really knowing what was going on. And when we were living in Oregon, and I had decided to do my Ph.D. in Fort Worth, Texas. And Texas is like another nation, pretty much. They think they're all their own country. And so I kind of figured I was going to go to seminary in Fort Worth, Texas. And my parents' example of being willing to go on an adventure with the family, you know, just sell everything, pack it up, and just move and see what happens. Because when we moved there, I didn't have a job. My wife didn't have a job. I had not even been accepted in the program that I was wanting to participate in. So it could have been I went down there, you know, I had gone and didn't even get accepted in the program, and then we would have had to figure out how to move back. But so I think it was that sense of, hey, let's just go as a family and let's just do this. I think their example really helped me just take the plunge, and it turned out to be an amazing adventure for the whole family. Yeah.
Wow. Can you talk a little bit more about your time in Australia and how that
yeah, it was
put you in
great.
Position where you are now?
I think especially growing up, because I would have been like 11 to maybe 17, 10 to 16, something like that. I should keep much better track of dates and stuff, but it was basically some of the most important years growing up. And we moved over there, and I mean, it's the same language. They speak English. We speak English. We speak American English. But being able to be in a different culture, I think, really helps understand and give you empathy for people from other cultures, from other nations, other languages, because you realize that things that other people take for granted, you know, just slang and stuff like that people use every day. And if you're not from there, you don't understand it. And so it has helped me, I think, hopefully have empathy for people from other countries. You know, I've got a lot of students from other countries, and to be able to extend them grace, you know, understanding a little bit what it's like to have grown up in another country. And we moved back here in like 1979, I think, after our time there. And that was before the internet or anything. And now we could just be Facebook, you know, with my friends there. And so when I left my friends behind. You know, maybe we'd write letters, but couldn't do phone calls. That was way too expensive. And there was no internet. And so when we left, and it was packing up and moving without anything, you know, without any contact, basically. And now it would have been a lot easier because, you know, we could have FaceTimed or that kind of thing. But yeah, it was just an amazing experience living in a different culture for those years. Definitely. Yeah.
Interesting. And so I'm just curious. So if you were to make that trip now with your family, would you how would you feel about that? Being able to utilize FaceTime and
Yeah.
the internet and do you think that it will, well, I one of the things that I think is that the world is much smaller because of the internet and because of Zoom and because of all of these things that we can do. But I'm just curious. I'm just trying to.
Yeah, and and I think there are it's the same. It's a blessing and curse, right? That you are able to keep that contact with people, but it could be a little too much contact where you are not engaging with the culture that you're in. This happens with Americans all the time when we go to foreign countries. We go, like I was in Scotland, I don't know how long ago, 10, 11, 12 years ago, something like that. And I'm in Scotland and there's a McDonald's there, which McDonald's sounds like a good Scottish restaurant, right? And we were there with students and they were like eating at the McDonald's. And I'm like, what? You got to try haggis or something, go to the local places. And so I think sometimes having that break where it's sink or swim, you just have to engage with this culture and not hold on to what you had before, especially for, I would think, language acquisition. It would be much better to just be all in. And, we've had students from other countries and there's a group of them. And since they can communicate with each other, which is really valuable, I think it makes picking up English a little harder. And if they had just been, thrown in the deep end. So yeah, it is a blessing because you are able to hold on to those relationships, but it probably keeps people from being too exposed to the culture that they've moved to, I would think. Yeah.
Thank you for your answer. And we have a question of how long have you served as an educator?
Yeah, so I've been at Corbin for 20 years. And before that, I was getting my Ph.D. at Southwestern Seminary in Fort Worth, Texas. For the last 3 years there, I was in the PhD program, but I was teaching a master's class, master's degree, theology to master's students, MDiv students mostly. And so, it's probably 23-ish year or something like that. And that experience of being able to teach in Texas while I was working on my PhD was the most amazing experience. Like when you do something for the first time that just feels right and it just brings you alive. Teaching that first class to students was so amazing, partially because, a lot of them were in ministry at the time. And so they were hungry because, they had to preach on Sunday. And so they had to figure out, what am I going to preach? And so the class was really relevant to them. And we're able to build a lot of conversations, build a lot of relationships. And so, going on a quarter of a century, I guess that's kind of crazy. Wow. And tons of changes, man. There are so many changes from when I started, because really there was an internet, but people they didn't have, cell phones or laptops. There was no Wi-Fi. And so you would go to a classroom and people just had paper and pen and they would be listening to you. And now with all the technology we have in the middle of us, it is a totally different world for sure. Yeah.
Do you remember when you had your first computer in the classroom?
Yeah, actually it's kind of weird because because I was living in Fort Worth, Texas, and the class I was teaching was in Houston. And so sometimes I would make the trip from Fort Worth to Houston. I'd fly down there, teach, and then fly back. And this is while I was working at UPS from like 2 in the morning till 8 in the morning. And so I'd work from 2 in the morning till 8 in the morning, take some classes, fly to Houston, teach, fly back, and then get up and work at UPS 2 a.m. the next morning. And I don't know how I did all that, but that first class I was teaching in Fort Worth, and they actually had the technology where it's all kind of like a Zoom thing, which is kind of mind blowing because we're talking like 1999, 98, something like that. And so I would sit in a classroom in Fort Worth and they had all the computer stuff set up. And then the students in Houston were there with a big screen and I was talking to them and I could see them. And so I think back to it now and how cutting edge that was. And so, yeah, I mean, at the very beginning, but that was definitely different than it is, and then it was, you had a computer and that was to show PowerPoint slides. And that was like a huge thing, right? Because all your notes you put up on a PowerPoint slide, and that's all people used it for. And so, yeah, I think for most of my experience, there's been some computers, but then once it became, laptops and students could get the internet, they were looking for much more interesting things than me, for sure. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. We have Dr. Clark from Tempe, Arizona, coming in with Kent. Tell us more about religious courses that you teach. Are they primarily framed in the credo of a specific denomination? Any experiences teaching comparative religions? What is tricky about teaching your subject matter?
Yeah, those are good questions. Our school is technically a Baptist school. And so, in fact, the name, it's now Corbin University. It used to be Western Baptist College or Western Baptist University. So it's a General Association of Regular Baptists. We Baptists have like millions of brands, right? Like it's amazing how many different Baptists there are. And so it is technically a Baptist school. So our statement of faith is a Baptist statement of faith. And so when I do teach theology, it is within those boundaries. And so, but really the main goal that I have in teaching subjects like theology is to teach students how to think, not what to think. And so there are, even with it, especially even within the Baptist realm, there are so many different beliefs. There's, there are Calvinistic, and then there's Arminian, and then some Baptists have women pastors. They're charismatic Baptists. There are Seventh-day Baptists that worship on, kind of like Seventh-day Adventist. And so within the Baptist realm, it's very open on beliefs. And so I definitely teach within the parameter of our statement of faith. But again, I'm trying to get the students to, the most important thing is why they believe what they believe. I don't want them to believe what I believe. I want them to figure out what it is that they believe. And so for a lot of things, I'm able to teach different views, like here's the Calvinistic view, here's our Arminian view. And I'm interested in them understanding both of them, and then understanding that it's up to them which of these camps that they fall into. And that really that is not, to separate also the deal breaker issues from secondary issues. And so in comparative religion, most of what we do specifically would be, because we have, we have Catholics in there, we have just a wide range. And so the way I try to approach it is saying, here's what Protestants believe about this issue. Here's the Catholic view on this issue. And to try to present it in a way that is respectful of, like Catholics, and to be able to say, these are the differences, but within the camp of Christian, there are a lot of variations on where you can fall in there. And it is, the tricky thing is honoring our statement of faith, because that's what we want to teach, but also encouraging students to be able to form their own beliefs, and realizing that their beliefs are going to change over time. Definitely. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Clark, so much for that great question. And for those who don't know, Dr. Clark is definitely a friend of Conversation with Tony Mobley, and I call him my ringer because he always brings in some great questions. And thank you, Kent, for that great response. Taylor Cinderhouse, Cincinnati, Ohio. What inspired you to become an educator?
That's a good question. My mother was a teacher, and I've always, been inspired by her. the movie Dead Poet Society. I know that that might be a little cliche, a little trite, but that movie definitely influenced me to think, wow, imagine being Robin Williams and being able to influence a group of people to have a love for learning. And it could have been just my own experience too, because I loved college. Getting my bachelor's degree, I went to a liberal arts college, and the idea of being able to, one semester study history and chemistry and biology and art history, and you look at that for a few months, and you go and you take other subjects. And to me, I absolutely loved it. And so I would have been in, college forever if my wife would let me. And so I figured out a way to do it. I go ahead and you get a degree, and then you go back and you go to school. And so and there are a few teachers too that really were very inspiring. When I was getting my PhD, Leo Garrett was one of my theology professors. And this guy was, when I took him 25 years ago, he was very old at the time, and he would teach about church history stuff. And he had actually been in a lot of these he was like a Protestant advisor at Vatican II, and he had met Karl Barth, and he, all of these things. The guy was brilliant. And at the beginning of class, he used to do like prayer requests. And so he would, ask if anyone had a prayer request, and people would, give their prayer requests or whatever. And this one time he asked, but he had prayer requests. And this one guy had said, yeah, my uncle has something going on. And I'm sitting there, and I'm just like, okay, let's get done with the prayer request. Let's get out, I'm here to learn. I'm not here to hear about your uncle, blah, blah. I had a horrible attitude. And I looked up, and Dr. Garrett, who was this absolutely genius, brilliant man, I look up at him, and there's this tear just coming down his face, and he was completely empathizing with this student. And I looked at that, I thought, wow, this guy is a genius, but he's also has the heart of somebody who really cares about his students. And so I think, just a lot of the teachers I've had have been huge, huge inspirations for sure. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Taylor, thank you so much for that question. How does a person with a Bachelor of Science degree in computer science go from that to a PhD in church history and theology?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's kind of funny. When I was doing my bachelor's, I probably changed my major 6 or 7 times. Because I do have ADD. I've got it like off the charts ADD, and so maybe that's part of it. But I originally went in wanting to be like an English teacher because I loved literature and stuff. And I realized, wow, at that specific time, there were people making a lot more money or getting teaching jobs like in math education. So I was like, I can do math. So I switched from sort of language arts education to math education. I ended up doing like 2 or 3 days of student teaching at high school, and it was the worst experience ever. I'm like, I cannot teach high school students. There is no way I could do this. And so I ended up switching again, and they told me, it's like, well, you have enough credits in just math to just take this semester, take some math classes. And I also had started taking computer science stuff just because I was super interested in it, and ended up getting was essentially a double major, one in math and the other in computer science. And I've always loved computers, and especially programming and stuff like that back in the day. And then, it just kind of a few steps from here to there, and did some things, and just ended up feeling like God wanted me to go to seminary. And so I ended up going to seminary, loving that too, wanting to study other things. And so, yeah, I'm not sure if there is a direct connection between any of those things, but probably none of us have those direct lines, right? Yeah.
Well, it may be the way in which God speaks to us. And,
Yeah.
I know between the two of us, we can probably whip on a nice sermon on the mysteries of how God leads us and guides us. But one of the things that I will say is that I think it's important that a community of faith embraces the spiritual and the science. And I think it's important for those two worlds to sort of work together. And so I think that it's enriching and informative for you to be able to be in both worlds. So congratulations on that.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun for sure. Yeah.
And so we have a question from Douglas Carmichael. How do you utilize your computer science knowledge in your current work?
Yeah, and that's been one of the big things, especially at our school when the pandemic hit back. It was at 2020 that when it hit in the fall of 2020. Yeah, and so not only did that hit us, but we also, our school was switching from one learning management system to a brand new one. And so we had been, Moodle was the one that we had been on for a long time, and we're switching to a totally different learning management system. And so this is how you connect with your class, all that sort of thing. And so we knew that in the fall of 2020, everyone was not only going to be maybe remote, but they were going to be remote within a system that they had never used before. And so we had to figure, so it's like, how do we train people on this? And I just kind of stepped up and said, I'll help train people. And I had not even opened that program. I had known nothing about it. But one thing computer science teaches you is don't be afraid to try things, and what's the worst that can happen, right? And so it has helped, I think, with being able to have a mentality of not being afraid of the technology, but just jumping in and saying, hey, let's try some things. Let's press buttons. Let's try this setting. And if it works, that's awesome. If it doesn't work, that's fine too. And so I think it really has been more than anything, just an idea of let's try stuff. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And embracing technology and understanding that we can use it as a tool, and not that it's using us, but that we are able to use it for whatever we need it to. Right. So, yeah.
Wow. Thank you, Douglas. Thank you, Douglas, for that great question. Oh, Douglas is back again. He says,
awesome.
Douglas says, what do you think of the megachurch phenomenon? Do you think that elaborate productions overshadow the core message of the church? Wow, that is a great question.
Wow. Yeah. I think that can happen even if it's not a mega church, right? Like when we were in Texas, we went to a pretty big church. I don't know if it would have been considered a mega church, but it was a pretty big church. And one of the reasons when we were in Texas, we wanted to be part of a big church because we had been a part of smaller churches and had some good and bad experiences. Any size of church is going to have pros and cons. And it was a big church, and they became bigger by getting smaller. I guess you could say that they saw that the point wasn't to have as many people possible, but was to have people connected with each other. That was the main point of it. And I think, the idea of, big elaborate production that could happen. But it can also happen with small churches with bad production, like the poor quality could interfere with the message. And, that's the whole point of maybe leading with values, right? Like our whole idea is that we need to have the value of whatever the message is you're trying to prepare, and that it is the star rather than the lights and the sound. And, that is a good question, because there is this balance between where it becomes distracting and where it actually enhances the message, kind of like what would it, kind of like special effects. Because I remember when Peter Jackson was doing The Lord of the Rings, he wanted the special effects to enhance the story, and he didn't want anybody going, "Oh, wow, look, that's a cool special effect." And I think that's the trick. But when he did King Kong, it was just the opposite. There were so many special effects that were out of control that there was no story there, because it was all, hey, look what we can do with monsters and stuff. And so, yeah, I think the key is to have it support the message rather than it becoming the message, which is really easy to do. You get a new toy, you're playing with it, and yeah, that's a good.
Yeah, I think that, and I think that I'm probably in a very unique position in that I was sharing with Dr. Kersey before our conversation that I am actually a member of a very large congregation, but I've been working since the pandemic with a very small congregation. And I have the benefit of being in both worlds and seeing, because they're both, the large church that I'm a part of has a media ministry, and they present on Facebook every Sunday. And during the pandemic, there was no in-person. And so everything was on Facebook, and any meetings that we had, they were on Zoom. And I had an opportunity to help a very small congregation that I have been allowed or have been asked to minister, to preach on every third Sunday of every month. And so one of the challenges is that in both situations, there is this desire to present to the world through, in one case on Facebook and another on YouTube. And so one of the things that has come through extremely clear in both settings is that, as you said, Dr. Kersey, the message as opposed to the method is the most important thing in both instances. And I think that if that is where you focus, you won't go wrong. But Douglas, thank you for this great question, because it is a question that I think more congregations need to wrestle with, particularly if, God forbid, that there should be another uptick in COVID cases. And we might have to continue to experience some hybrid in-person, digital, virtual services, going forward. But I will say this about megachurches. The virtual experience has not been a new phenomenon for those extremely large congregations. They were already doing it when the pandemic hit. And so, but I do know that there have been some churches that have seen a larger intake of members because they had the benefit of not being limited by their physical location. They were able to glean more members because their membership was beyond the specific location and those four walls. And so that is something for ministries to consider. If you are, and we're not preaching, but if you are in the business of doing evangelism and wanting to share what we call the good news, then you need to think about how you want to present that to a larger world. And so, again, Douglas, thank you so much. And thank you, Dr.
In fact,
Kersey.
so I heard that Saddleback, that's the big church in Southern California, Rick Warren's church. They actually, during the pandemic, I think it was 2021, was actually their biggest year of growth ever. And it's because they have churches in like 7 or 8 different countries. And so they were already geared up for ministering to people or connecting with people, I guess you could say, in so many different other places that to them it was an easy transition. You just, okay, now let's just add this variable to it. And so, yeah, and a lot of those big places too, they aren't afraid of experimenting and trying things. And so it was definitely a great time for experimentation for sure. And a lot of them just took advantage of it. Yeah.
Yes. It's an amazing story, and there's a lot of information out there. And so if those who are watching, that is definitely something that you want to research and look at for your ministries going forward. Okay, the next question is, what has office hours, Saturday education hours, have meant to you?
Okay, now it's time for evangelism. Here we go. This is the real one, the Church of Office Hours. Yeah, it was my experience. Like, the one podcast I listen to, watch every single week, and I have forever and ever, is Mac Break Weekly. And, with Leo Laporte's the host, and then there's a couple, and Andy and Renee are on it. And then this guy named Alex Lindsay has been on it forever too. And so I've been a huge fan of that podcast because I'm an Apple nerd. Like, you do not want to get, another evangelism thing that I could go on forever about. But I'm a big Apple fan anyway. So anything doing with Mac type stuff. And so I watched that podcast forever. And I'd been a big fan of Alex Lindsay because I always really appreciated his view on things, his value of high excellence, and just a lot of his philosophy on life. I really enjoyed. And when I found out he was doing this thing called Office Hours, this was way back at the beginning too. It would have been 2020 spring or summer, something like that. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to check that out. That sounds kind of interesting. And so I just started watching it, and was, and I'm just nerdy enough to appreciate, deep dives into audio and video type stuff, even though I don't maybe understand 100% what they're talking about. I find it really interesting that this is technology that somebody knows about, and I just appreciated their level of nerdiness. And then when I found out that Alex had a really, he really cares a lot about education, and that they were dedicating a lot of these shows to education because he values it so much. And so I watched a bunch of them, and then eventually just figured, well, one of these Saturdays I'll log in and see what happens. And so I logged in, and just a great community. I think, Tony, you were a lot of those, and Emily and Aaron and Chris Clark was at a lot of those, and it just felt like I had a stronger bond, I think, with a lot of the Office Hours people than I did with colleagues that up this time I was right next to their office because I never saw them because I was home the whole time. And so I built up a really strong connection with the Office Hours people. And every time I would watch or participate, I would learn something. I would be encouraged about something. And it's such an encouraging community. And for me, one of the highlights too was I didn't remember what it was, but I upgraded kind of to a different camera, different mic, different, all that kind of system. And one of the days, just whatever. And I had, this was back in the days where you raise your hand physically. And I had, Alex said, okay, Kent, what do you think about this? Whatever. And then he said, whoa, Kent, your setup looks really good. And it sounds really good. And for most people, that would have been a throwaway remark, like, oh, thank you very much. But for me, that was huge. I mean, that's like Eric Clapton saying, I like your guitar playing or something, to have Alex say, appreciate something audiovisually that I had done Okay, I'm done. I'll check out now. That's that's what I was looking for. But that was huge, and it really, I don't think it's too strong a statement to say that community got me through the pandemic. It helped me understand how to do, it introduced me to like the ATEM Mini. We were talking about that before, and how that little machine revolutionized everything I was doing on, Zoom classes and stuff. And it opened up tons of room for me to be able to do what I was supposed to do and do it well, and be able to coach other teachers too. Like they would say, what are you using? How, your thing stands out from other people. And so I was able to talk them through, try this, and this, get these 3 or 4 things and you'll be good to go. And it has been huge, because I really do think it, one thing Alex says is that a good AV system on Zoom raises your authority with whoever you're talking to, for business people. It's by
Absolutely.
using a cheap, webcam and a cheap microphone, it really is walking into a business meeting with shorts and flip-flops. And people are not going to take you as serious. And that realization changed the way I did everything. And so I don't know if I'm spouting way too much about office hours here or not.
I don't think you are, but listen, I think we need to push this a little bit more. And the reason why I say that we need to push a little bit more is because not only is this important as far as education is concerned, I think this is important to houses of worship. It's important. Sometimes you only have one chance to make a good first impression.
Yeah.
And I think it's important for houses of worship to recognize that fact too, particularly if you are only doing virtual services. The kind of effort that you put into in-person worship experience, making sure the church is clean, making sure that there's paper towels and tissue in the bathroom, and that everything is clean and wiped down and shining, and the flowers are in place, and all of those things that you work on to make sure that it is, the church is immaculate when people come in. That same type of effort, it's important that same type of effort is made for the virtual worship experience or the education experience as well. And sometimes we get lazy and it's just a Zoom, or it's just a Skype, or whatever it might be, and that, we're going to do this for a few minutes and then we're going to go back to whatever we're doing. No, the same effort, the same things, if you had to do that cleaning on Saturday night, you need to be preparing for worship on Sunday morning, on Saturday night, virtually. And I think that it's still that piece is still kind of minimized, and people are not seeing the importance of it. But we do know, we have examples, we have data that the people who are doing very well in terms of the production of it and doing the extra things, the dotting of the I's and crossing of the T's, and using the nice cameras, and going back to sort of Douglas's original question about the production value. The production value is important, but it must be led by the message. But that does not mean that you don't, just like you put on that nice suit or those nice clothes and those shiny shoes when you go in person, you need to make the same type of effort virtually. Yeah.
It's kind of like Alex has said, a few times, it's people don't notice good AV, they feel it. And it's, the minute they start noticing, you're in trouble. It's like the audio doesn't sound right, or they're out of focus or something. And people, if you get it right, people are not really going to even notice it. It's kind of the same thing with the special effects and stuff, is that it needs to just build the case of whatever you're saying, because everything else is a distraction. Kind of when I was pastoring, one of our main focuses for worship was to eliminate distractions. Eliminate as many distractions as you can, because that's going to help people focus on whatever they're going to focus. And marketers know this really well, like to do, get rid of everything but the message that we're trying to get across. And it shows that you care about your people, whether it's students or if it is a business situation, you care about your clients or your customers, right? It all does come down to a value of people, that we care so much about you that we're willing to invest our time and money or whatever to make your experience really, really good. Yeah.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
I almost said amen.
No, yeah. But yeah, office hours has just been, and it's, to me, one of the biggest joys, been able to talk to Alex a few times. He's one of those people I consider a mentor, even though we've never been in the same room together. But his generosity blows me away, and that's the thing about the office hour community, is that these guys are so generous with their time and knowledge. And it's like I really consider it's like a master's degree that I've received on audiovisual stuff, that some people pay a lot of money and they travel somewhere, that if you just tune in and listen to what they're asking and take note of it, it really is an education unlike any other, for sure. Yeah.
And it is I believe that it is a master's degree, but I'm still working on mine. I'm still working. And I am also thankful. And this is not really about the office hours church, but I will say that I have gotten so much help with the smaller congregations that I'm working with, and they're now on YouTube, and so they are. We went from people being reluctant to actually turn their cameras on to actually having services on YouTube. So it's great. Been an amazing journey, and it's all thanks to Alex and office hours. And so again, thank you to the community. And we could talk we could talk a couple of hours about Saturday education and how important that has been, and looking forward to that getting restarted back in the fall. When the school starts back.
Yeah, it's so cool.
Yeah, Douglas Carmichael is back again, and he says many airports and other transport terminals have chapels, and sometimes pastors on site. With the growth of telepresence and communications technologies like Zoom, do you think a remote worship space would be more efficient for those use cases? And I would say there's probably some places that are already doing it. But Dr. Kersey, what do you think?
Yeah, I think definitely. There are services where people offer like translation on the fly. Like you can call these numbers, and if you need a translator for Spanish or Russian or maybe some more obscure language or something, there are people who are just sitting, they're doing other things, but they're available. And then if they get a call, they pick it up and they talk to you, whatever. So it'd be, I could see how people who are chaplains could easily be in wherever they are, in England or something, and then a hospital in Chicago, somebody needs to talk to somebody, and it just links them up, and they are able to talk to each other face to face. That's the thing about Zoom, is that people see its limitations, but we need to understand that it's basically removed all geographical barriers. Like it is like you being in Atlanta, me being in Oregon, that's a geographical barrier. Like we can't get over that. but now we can, because we can look in each other's eyes, we can talk to each other, we can, find out how the family's doing. And you've basically removed space, and with YouTube, we've removed time or the barrier that time used to be. And so I think that would be amazing if somebody could figure out some sort of network where you were doing that. People are just sitting at their computer wherever, and they are on call, and they can connect right away to somebody, and they can pray with them or talk to them or counsel them. And now you've had this one person who was only available in his town now is available to the world, basically. And I think there are a lot of really cool possibilities with that. If I was a little more entrepreneurial, I would start working up a business plan now, but I think that's a great idea. Yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to share this. So, my wife is currently going through chemotherapy. And one of the unique things is that she's going through her treatments through Cancer Centers of America.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the unique things is that they have a lot of chapels, a lot of services and outreach on campus. But they also allow you to have online access to their chaplain staff. Mm-hmm. And so I think that the key is starting to turn, Douglas, for this kind of thing. And as a matter of fact, I was given a handout the last time my wife and I were both there, and they are actually offering some training for churches that want to support their members that are dealing with cancer. And so they are, this is an online class that you can take through, churches can take, their church leadership can take through Cancer Centers of America. So it kind of speaks to the very thing that you were asking in your question, Douglas. So thank you so much for your question. And thank you, Dr. Kersey, for your response. Taylor Sunderhouse is back again, and he says, how can we follow your work? So how can we follow your work, sir?
That's okay. My handle, I guess, on YouTube and Instagram, kind of been doing more stuff on Instagram. But on YouTube, I have, if you go to youtube.com/dead theologians, it's all just one word, Dead Theologians. And I got that from Dead Poets Society. And so dead theologian is kind of a weird word, but I think we need to learn from the dead theologians, the people from a long time ago. So that's sort of where that started from. But if you go to, and I think Twitter, I've done something, but put a lot of pictures up of just my hobby of photography, but my but my classroom type stuff is on youtube.com/dead theologians. And on there are a few, I've kind of have put some how-to type videos on there, but also some class videos. That most of what I do for online classes is just for a specific class. And so most of the video stuff that I do is just for that class. So if you want to see it, you got to take a class. So there you go. So, and every once in a while I will put up a video and just make it public just to see what happens with it. And most of the time, a few people watch it, but there are a few on there. It's kind of crazy. I was doing some sort of from philosophy stuff about different arguments for the existence of God, looking at, Thomas Aquinas, David Hume, that kind of stuff. And I had fun putting those together. And then one of them was on Immanuel Kant, a very obscure philosopher. What is his view on the existence of God? And last time I looked, and then I just put it up there. I didn't expect anybody really to watch it. And all of a sudden, some, a friend of mine says, "Oh, someone, like a lot of people have been looking at that video." And I looked at it, there were like 17,000 people that had looked at it, or at least watches. I don't know how much, it could be that's clicked and unclicked, but, and a lot of comments on it too. So one of the most obscure videos I ever made, I didn't think anybody would even care about it, and got a ton of views, which is kind of, and I think for academics, this is why I think making videos is so important. Not to disregard academic writing, but I think we as academics need to learn the art and skill of making good videos, or making videos that communicate, because it's such a different audience. If I had written a academic paper about Immanuel Kant's view of God, there would have been 3 people who read it, and that would have been it. But you put it up on, and they wouldn't even cared, but you put it up on YouTube, and all of a sudden, again, you've removed geographical limitations, you've removed time limitations, which is academically what our world is. You write a paper, you travel to San Diego, you present it at a conference, and 15 people show up, and then you pack it up and you're done with it, and that's over. But if we could think of moving more towards video, which also communicates to the whole world, right? Like, I've had, a lot of the comments are people from Turkey and Russia and all these other places, and YouTube does the interpretation a lot of times. And all of a sudden you are now communicating with a huge audience. So I don't know how that relates to what the question was, but that was my trail of most of the stuff I do is on YouTube. And I haven't put anything up for a little while on that, because I've just been doing it for the classes. I need to do some more up there. But it's fun. I really enjoy making videos. And so Dead Theologians on YouTube, on Instagram, you can see just my hobby of photography that just kind of helps distract me from other things that are not encouraging in life. Yeah.
So you are indeed a Renaissance man. So,
or easily distracted or something. Yeah.
Yeah. I think the answer to the question was, Taylor wanted to know how to follow you. And so you gave him some great examples on how to follow you. So thank you for sharing. And can you share the link one more time? It's Dead Theologians.
Yeah. Plural. Dead Theologians. And if you just, youtube.com/Dead Theologians, it'll take you there, and a lot of random, some of them are me teaching, and in a classroom type setting. A lot of times I just set up a GoPro and do it. And then I use that. Like one of them I did on, I think Screw Tape Letters. It was just a class session of like 20 minutes, and it's got a few thousand views, which really surprises me. But, people are interested in that subject, and so they will watch it, and people said it's been encouraging to them. So it's fun. Yeah.
Yeah, we have it in the chat. So thank you again, Dr. Kersey, for that. Dr. Chris Clark is back again, and he says, have you had experiences with summer church camps? If yes, what differences, cost and benefits, describe church camps compared with worship and good works during the school year?
So I have not had much experience with church camps. I used to go to them, and there are a lot of people who have. My daughter worked in one for a while. And so I think there's definitely those benefits of special events, like summer, you are taken out of your environment and you are bone tired and you're bitten by mosquitoes and you're sunburnt and kind of your defenses are down and you're in a cool community. And so I think those experiences are so valuable. And, even thinking of how do we build those experiences during a school year, I think could be really valuable as well. But I know Chris has a lot of experience with those sorts of experiences. And so, I think anything that is a little bit different and takes people out of their comfort zone has a lot of value to it for sure. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Clark. Another great question.
Yeah.
Douglas is back again. How do you bring a strong ethical and moral foundation to science/technology/engineering education at the university level?
Ooh, that's good. Yeah. And I would say essentially it's the Jurassic Park principle. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. And that's one of the most important things, that technology lets you do a bunch of stuff, but we don't even really know what we're capable of, and I think we see this in the medical field sometime. My wife is actually volunteering with a group of refugees from different, that welcomes refugees to our city from other nations. And she's been helping them a lot with medical type issues. And you can imagine the difference it is between a country that has very little medical technology to America, where we have so much medical technology. And I am so thankful for medical technology, because 12 years ago, I had a aortic valve replaced. Now I have a mechanical valve. And my wife has undergone cancer treatments. And if it wasn't for medical technology, neither one of us would be alive right now. And so it's saved our lives. And so I think definitely those are things we should do, but there are other issues that we have to think about. Just because you can do something, is the long-term benefit actually pay off, right? And I think there are issues in medical things of how long do you keep people alive who are on respirators, things like that. And I think a lot of ways our medical technology has outpaced our ethics, because there are certain ethical questions of that we haven't really settled on that. Quality of life, all those kinds of questions, which I'm not sure of the answer to right now. But yeah, I think that would be my big answer to that is, what purpose does it serve? And yeah, and we always, in one of my classes, we talk a lot about like the trolley problem, where if you're going down there's a train coming down and it's going to kill 3 people, but you can flip a switch and it'll go and just kill 1 person instead. You probably heard that thought experiment a lot of times. And those are 2 different ethical approaches. And, and the thing, the bottom line of that is there isn't a right or wrong answer to that dilemma. It's that in different situations, it calls for different approaches. And the thing is to ask the right kind of questions, like which is the appropriate question here. So yeah, now we're getting to philosophy. And so we could,
Yeah.
we could divert a long time. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Douglas.
That's
Douglas
good.
has
Yeah.
great
Yeah.
questions.
Really
and
good.
he's come back with another great
This is
question.
good. This
So
is good.
here we
Yeah.
go again. So one of the selling points of SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles, I hope I pronounced that right, is that it can be a hub for global events with exceptional work of the office hours team with almost no budget. Does that bring global events within the reach of anyone with the motivation? I would
Yeah.
say absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's the thing that this has proven is like, I just got a camera and a mic, and you see people using that for great connection. I think YouTube again is a great example of this. And one of the things that Casey Neistat, who has millions and millions of followers on YouTube, he made a video a while ago showing that his most successful video ever, he just did like, I think it was on a GoPro or something, or it's just an old phone. It was like an iPhone 4 or something. And he did the whole story just on that. And it was his, millions, maybe a billion, I don't know, but tons of following. And he had hardly any, and all he had at the time was just a motivation to tell this story. And I think is, yeah, that this is the perfect time for anybody to be heard, which is great globally because, people are disadvantaged not having a lot, but you don't need a lot. You just need something interesting to say. And the platform is there for you to say it. Right.
Yeah. And I think too, if you think about this conversation that we're having tonight, you're in Oregon. I'm in Atlanta. Conversation with Tony Mobley has celebrated 1 full year. The very first conversation with Dr. Hazmat Gaijar in Cape Town, South Africa.
Yeah.
It was 3 a.m. in the morning when he appeared on the very first conversation with Tony Mobley. And, you know, that is, I think, the beginning of this whole, you know, global experience, because I had some kind, I had a webcam, I believe from 360, little square webcam, and I had my $15 microphone that I plugged into my ATEM Mini, and I was on the go. And Kent, I was happy to be able to have that conversation with him with, you know, very little. And you know, of course, you know, conversation with Tony Mobley has, you know, gotten a little bit better with lights and sound and other different things that have been added. But, you know, what, it was a $50 setup when I first started with conversation with Tony Mobley, old MacBook Pro 2012, and here we go. And so,
I remember you getting on office hours too. Like the first couple times I happened to be watching that, and I so appreciated your willingness to learn, you know, and your just like, hey, I'm going to get in here and talk to these guys, and how kind and generous they were to you. And, you know, here's somebody who is just trying to figure it out. And none of them were like, well, you know, call us later and we'll talk to you. They were willing to give up valuable time to help you out. And I don't think there was not an insincere moment from them in wanting to help you be successful.
There wasn't, and maybe they knew that I was in the hot seat was trying to help my church, and so, but you know, I had to figure it out. We had to figure it out. We had to get some help, and I'm thankful so much for that help that office hours gave in the very beginning. They've come a long way. We've come a long way, and excited about it. So that's the answer to that question, Douglas. So thank you again.
Yeah,
and Douglas is back with another question.
This is good. Yeah.
So he says, many settings, medical and psychiatric, have used soft music as a way to relax patients and help them through significant events. How can the electronic music media arts help people serve their populations better?
Yeah, soft music helping people relax. That's the thing about music is how powerful it is to communicate. That's why when you're watching movies, Steven Spielberg and George Lucas, like they use music to tell the story. In fact, most of it is from the music, like building up, like, oh, this is going to be exciting or romantic or whatever, and how much that communicates more than the visuals do a lot of times. And I think I think people who are producing music and
Ken,
that sort of thing.
I made a mistake in reading the question. So let me go back to it again. It's the communities help people serve the populations better.
Yeah.
So it's how can
so people who are producing those kind of things, maybe, right?
People like you.
I think just having their stuff out there, you know, and whether it's on YouTube or whatever, like if it's music that is, anybody can use it, because you can pay a lot of music if you want to use music or any kind of media like photographs or videos and stuff. There's a lot of people who make a lot of money off that for stock type things. But if people were willing to produce that for people to use for free, I think something like that would be amazing. If you had a YouTube channel with, you know, here's some music I've done, just use it for education, because usually education doesn't have a whole lot of money for that kind of thing. And so people willing to do that and put it out for other people to use, that would be very cool. Yeah. Have a YouTube channel. Like that.
I think that I actually misread the question. I think what he's trying to get at is, how can the electronic music arts community help people like you in terms of possibly being a resource for pastoral care and ministry in that way? I think that that's what he was trying to get at.
Yeah. And I think any platform that makes it available, something like YouTube or something where people can access it, whatever they need it for. Whether it's, and you see a lot of those channels that they just have music playing 24 hours. It's just always playing, and people just tune in. It could be they're studying and they need help. And that's the cool thing about YouTube, is it is available to everybody, all, around the world, anytime. And so if there was something like that available, that would be kind of cool, I think.
Thank you, Douglas, for that great question. How has your interactions with students changed since COVID-19?
Yeah, it has, I think in some ways there are weird ways where it's almost better sometimes, being kind of virtual. One of the advantages is on Zoom, I always have their name in front of me, and so you can always see who you're talking to. It's kind of a joke, but it's also kind of true. If you have 20 people there, their name is always in front of them. And when they're in a classroom, especially with masks on, I'm not good at names anyway, but you have 50 people in a classroom, they all are covered and you see this much of them and it's hard to remember names. So, I mean, that's almost a trivial one, but it is kind of true, is you actually do have that. And one of the things that I started, when I teach classes, one of the first assignments I have students do is it used to be I would have them write like a 2-page paper, just who are you, where are you from, tell me about your family, what are the most important experiences in your life type, just to get to know you type assignment. Not a whole lot of, grading to it, but I just want to get to know who they are. And I switched that when like the pandemic stuff started to having them make a video for me. And it was, I tell you, it was groundbreaking, because especially when you're not in the classroom with them, every single one of them, it was like having a conversation, because they would have the video and it would just be on their phone. So it wasn't, big Hollywood production, but I could see their eyes and they could see, and so when I would send videos to them, they could see my eyes. And so in some ways, that pandemic virtual education thing, there were some negatives to it, but I think there were also a lot of positives to it, because rather than being in a classroom at a certain time, you're now, when the students are ready to receive that information, they can do it whenever, 3 a.m, 4 a.m, or whatever. And it's not you standing up in front of them where you're, this big of a person, but you're actually on their phone or you're on their computer. And this is the connection, eye to lens, that you're looking into their eyes and they can see your eyes looking directly at them. And I really believe there is just a ton of value to that. And to me, it changed. Like even now when I do face-to-face classes, I'm still having them send me videos for just about everything, because I think for me, I would rather just make a 5-minute video than sit and write a 5-page paper, because to me, it's a lot easier. And you actually get to hear them, what did you think about this chapter? And they're able to actually tell you about it, which is super cool. In one of the classes I did, I used a book from a person, I'm friends. I know him. I'm not best friends, but we've talked a few times. And, so he's a friend and he wrote this book and I used it in my class. And one of the assignments I had was for students to upload like a 3 to 5 minute video telling me what you thought about these chapters. And I didn't expect it, but the students got so much out of this book. It's called After Doubt. If you want to look it up, it's called After Doubt by by AJ Swoboda, an amazing book about people struggling with faith, and which is everybody struggles with that question. And it's just a real honest look at that. And so I had students, just make a 3 to 5 minute video about your reaction. And the students were able to not just write, but they're look into, I could see their eyes and what it meant to them, because it was really meaningful to a lot of students. And the one student, she was almost in tears as she was telling about how meaningful this book had been for her and talking about just the influence that it had on her. And I asked her permission. I said, can I send your video to AJ, the author? She gave me permission. And so I sent him the video. And he was blown away by it, because you can imagine, writing a book, you write it and you send it out there and you're never really sure, are people reading it? Does it make an impact? I don't know. And he said, when I watch that video, he says, I'm in tears now, because how that's what I wanted this book to do, but I didn't know whether it was doing it or not. And so that connection, if it had just been a letter or, a paper that student had written, you wouldn't have seen the emotion. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I couldn't have sent it to the author,
Right. Absolutely. We are in speed round. So we have more questions than time. So we're gonna
awesome.
We're gonna go through these questions. So the next one is, can we talk about different applications used for virtual education, if you are?
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing that I've sort of learned is the difference between synchronous and asynchronous. It used to be like when you watch TV in the 80s, like if you wanted to watch MASH, you had to be in front of the TV at 8:15 or 8:30 on CBS or whatever it is. And if you missed it, you missed it, right? Those were the old days when you watched TV. You just were there and it was over. You couldn't rewind, you couldn't tape it. Maybe you'd see it in reruns, but you didn't know. And that was synchronous, right? But now people watch TV asynchronously. Like most people will watch TV on YouTube or Disney Plus, or watch, Obi-Wan Kenobi, which is a great show. And, they're going to watch it when they want to watch it. And, because I remember hearing you, Tony, talk about how frustrating it was to watch one episode and then have to wait a week,
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is that why does Disney do that? I guess they do it to stretch out subscriptions. They want people to be watching other things too, but they could put them all up at once if they wanted to. And it's frustrating not to. But that's what we do with education. It's like, we have this subject matter, but we're going to stretch it out for 15 weeks, where you actually could give it to them all at once. And you could say, okay, here's the class at your pace. You want to go through it in a week, you want to go through it in 20 weeks, whatever. It's up to you to do it how fast you want to do. And I think that's sort of a move that we're going to have to make in education, to think more asynchronously, because it was, people think about a class and it's like, well, it's on Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 11 o'clock in SC 203, right? It's a certain place, a certain time. And then whatever happens there happens. And when it's over, it's over. But I think we need to, and that's synchronous, right? That's like watching TV in 1984. But we need to think of it as watching TV in 2022, is that students learn best all different times. Some students learn great at 8 a.m. Some learn great at different times. Some of them are like 2 a.m. And so I think it's wise to make learning available to people on their time. Does that make sense? Yeah. So
what I was thinking as you were saying that, one of the things that occurred to me is that it could be that the materials that needed to be spread over the 15 weeks could be all shared at one time. And then over the 15 weeks, you actually have conversations related to the materials. And that would be another way to, I think, energize the engagement of the conversation between the instructor and the students. And maybe that's a Saturday education.
No, I think that's absolutely right, because I think that's a different, because the way I think of it is you use asynchronous for information and you use synchronous for collaboration, and so when we're together in a room, and this comes back to what Alex's philosophy too, is that you don't use that time for lecturing. You use that time, have the students watch, this is flipped classroom idea, is that people consume that information beforehand. And then when you get together, you're actually applying it. Maybe it's a case study, maybe it's something like that. And so and I think it's that shift that is huge that we all need to kind of think about. And it's such a different way of thinking about education, really.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your.
Yeah.
I have one quick question. Have you watched the last episode of Kenobi yet?
I have not. I've been rewatching it, and my wife and I, because we're actually going to Star Wars, or we're going to Disneyland soon. And so she's trying to get educated on the whole Star Wars thing, which you can never do. And, you have to take years and years for that. Right. And so we've been watching Star Wars Rebels. It's the animated one on Disney. And that is a great show. It is really good. But I watched the first couple Obi-Wans, and I forget, it's been so long. So I'm kind of going through them again because I'm trying to remember what happened. But it's a great show for catching up on all the Star Wars that came before. It kind of brings it together, it seems. Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I was just curious. Okay. We're going to skip the next question because I think you have already answered it.
Mm-hmm.
And let's talk about, can you share a past success story that was meaningful to you?
Yeah. I think that one about being able to encourage that author from what a student had said, that sort of thing. To me, I think I love doing that. And one of the, and this is just another thing, I don't know where I got this from, but when we started the whole virtual thing, and like we had Zoom classes and classes on Zoom, and students were really fearful of that. And they never had good, because they had so many bad experiences on Zoom that they did not want to be on it. And reluctantly they would get on it. And so being able to have like the ATIM mini and stuff like that, one of the things I did, and I think I may have got this from Alex too, is kind of a pre-show type thing. And so about 10 minutes before the class, I would just be playing fun videos, whatever it was. There's that one video where, people, old time movies dancing to modern songs, just a very dancey, upbeat type stuff. And I would just have that playing as students would log in. And when they would come on, that, I don't know what they were expecting to see, some crusty old professor like me or something, but I would just have like fun music and people dancing and stuff. And it was so cool to be able to see people sign on, and the ones who did have their video on, the look on their face, like, what is good? What is it? They just look of confusion and then it'll look kind of a smile, and you'd see them dancing around to it. And it, just that, like, we're going to have fun here. We're not, I'm not going to try. I want it to be fun, and being able to approach it, a lot of times the classroom is like a jazz type experience, right? Like people have been teaching a long time, and you improvise whatever the students are doing. And teaching on Zoom and that sort of thing, it's a very sort of orchestra. You have to have every minute orchestrated. You have to, okay, we're going to do this poll, then we're going to do this video, then we're going to have this discussion. And you have to think through it that way. And so I think, towards the end of it, being able to think of a completely different way of organizing a class and have students track with you the whole time, that was kind of fun to do. And so maybe that was a success, I think. Yeah.
I think that was a success. And one of the things that it points to is that education is reciprocal. And thank you for the work that you do. Mm-hmm. We have another question. As you reflect on where you are in education, are there things that have prepared you for this moment that you can share?
Yeah. I mean, I think just always being curious about life, and I think this was a statement from Walt Whitman or something, but I think it was on what's that on Apple TV, the Ted Lasso, the one where he's the soccer coach in England, and made this statement about, people are either curious or they're judgmental. That you either are wondering about the world or you're judging the world, and if that's good, that's bad, or whatever, rather than just being curious. Like I'm not sure why the world is this way, and just trying to remain curious. I think that will take you far. I think choosing to be curious rather than judgmental. I think that has a lot of staying power to it.
Thank you for that answer. Douglas is back.
Mm-hmm.
How can we leverage technology to help families develop healthier communication and relationships?
Yeah. I mean, maybe it's making sure that they share it together, rather than, because one of the tendency is people are always, kind of dividing up. Like you take your phone, go there, you take your tablet and go there, but whatever you're doing, share it together. Maybe that's watching a show together or watching a YouTube thing together, or, but definitely staying together while you're doing it and not dividing up into different camps. I think that would probably be one of them anyway. Yeah. Fortunately, our kids, we didn't have that technology when our kids were little, and we didn't have phone, any of that kind of stuff. They're both a lot older now. And so, but they saw that big change, like they were high school or whatever, once people started having phones. And so we have grandkids that I'm nervous about them navigating these waters. So I've got a lot to learn in that for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things that I wanted to share, Douglas, I hope this helps. I have 6 other siblings. And at the beginning of the pandemic, we would have a Zoom family meeting every Sunday at 7 p.m. And we have not missed. And we have it even last Sunday, Father's Day. It was a lot shorter than normal, but we did connect. We did, turn on our cameras, look at each other, see each other, we do weekly check-ins, and that's what we do. And so it has, we share a lot of things. I share, I talk to them to death about office hours and different technologies and things I'm doing with churches and all that kind of thing. But it's a check-in. It's a way in which the family can, and most of my siblings have grandchildren. And so there is a lot of conversation about them and that kind of thing. So I hope that helps answer your question, Douglas.
Yeah.
So you're speaking to the world. What do you want them to know, Dr. Kersey?
Ooh, that's good. Yeah. I think one of the, I don't know if this is advice or whatever, but never assume you're the smartest one in the room. That almost rhymes too, doesn't it? Never assume you're the smartest one in the room. Whatever conversation you're in, is to always, you just assume that the other person knows a lot more than you do about something, and be able to pull that out. It's like, what excites you? What do you know a lot about? Because we, especially academics, we are very insecure people, and we want to, strut our plumage around and talk about how great we are. And when we get with other people, the tendency is to tell people how smart we are, but we're not. There are things that anybody you're having a conversation, whether it's a 6-year-old, they know a lot more about something than you do. And if you want to encourage them, pull that out, figure out what is it that they know more about that you can learn, because we're always learning. We always need to be learning. And the minute you stop learning, you're in trouble. And we learn that through other people. That's why I appreciate your show, the conversations, because we all need to learn from each other. And sometimes the trick is, what is that you know more about than I do? I think you know more about Star Wars than I do. So maybe we need to have have you and my wife and me on a call or something. Or when we get to Star Wars, when we get to Disneyland, we can text you questions about what is so many different names and people that I don't really know a lot about. But yeah, when we get to Disneyland, we're going to have to know all that. So, yeah.
I'm going to make you laugh. I thought initially I thought you said, I'm not the smartest person. I'm not the smartest person in the Zoom and not the room.
Oh, same thing, right? Yeah, yeah. Whatever you're in, you're always, yeah. I may have said that, yeah. So,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being with me tonight, Dr. Kersey. It's been fun, as I knew it would be. I really appreciate you being on with me, and we are out of time, and this will conclude Conversation with Tony Mobley this week. And I'm going to share my thanks, a special thanks to Kimberly Mobley, Ron Mobley, Global Family and Friends, Alex Lindsay, Office Hour members, DVE Store, Liminal Entertainment Technologies, Byte Hive, VDO360.com, ApprovalLoan.com, Cloud Bedrock LLC, Ken Jordan, Jonas Dattel, Aaron Huslich, Cherrick Cheetah, David Brady, Marcus Lee Folk, Richard Lavery, Chris Fenwick, Manolo Lozano, Jeffrey Powers, Bo Cordell, Mickey McAchore, Hazmat Geiser, Doug Moeller, Laura Thompson, Brian Chan, Dennis Champion Walker, Roscoe Jones, George Butters, Joshua Minden, Danielle Maxwell, Conversation with Tony Mobley producer, Clylock Lopez, Waterman, and special thanks to Taylor and Adrian who helped us out tonight. Thank you all so much for all the help and all the things that you do for Conversations with Tony Mobley. Thank you, Dr. Kent Kersey, for our conversation today. And thank you for doing the work that you do. I appreciate you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Featured guest next week, educator, Ms. Erin Graham. Coming soon, more interesting conversations and upcoming conversations is scheduled for more educators, mental health conversations, filmmakers, music, other creators, more interesting conversations with people. And if you like our conversations, we ask that you go to conversationwithTonyMobley.com and see all of the great content that we have on the website. And you're welcome to go to YouTube and do the like and subscribe as well. Again, thank you all so much. Thank you, Dr. Kersey. Good night, everyone. See you next week. And here we are, 1 year and 1 episode done with Conversations with Tony Mobley. Take care. Good night. Good day. Take care.